Hey everybody, welcome back to the Chaotic Little Book Corner. My name's Acacia. Oh my god. This cold, I cannot kick it. Okay. Today we're going to be doing the final 10 books of my December wrap-up. So this is part 3 of my December wrap-up. I will link parts 2 and 1 down below in the description box. So let's just dive in. Alright, so these are, again, in least to most favorites. So I've already showed my least favorites in part 2. And this is my more favorites than that, but leading up to my most favorites. So I read A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. And I think, honestly, that this is a sweet little book. I think that it is really an interesting conversation about how a woman should behave and how a child should behave regardless of how they are treated. I think that there are some aspects of it that are highly not feminist. I think that it definitely stands on its own, and I can understand why it's a classic, but I felt that the ending pissed me off. And it was a happy ending, but it pissed me off. And I am not going to go into spoilers, but I felt like the ending of this book really made me frustrated, and that disappointed me immensely. I think that there were some really sweet parts to this. I think it was a really beautiful story about a daughter who really loves her father and who tries so hard to be a good daughter and who tries so hard to be a good person. And I think it's a really interesting conversation about that, but I don't think that the ending is fair. I just don't. And that is my opinion. A Kata Witch by Nadia Okafor. Nadia Okafor. And how do I feel about this? Everyone loves this book. I went into it with very high expectations. And I think that that was my problem. I went into this thinking that it was going to be magical and perfected and wonderful and amazing and this absolutely epic tale. I'm going to continue on with the series because I did enjoy it. And I'm going to continue to keep it on my shelf because I did enjoy it. But I would have enjoyed it more if I hadn't had this build up in my head that this was like the best middle grade novel out there. I don't know if it's middle grade or YA. Go ahead and tell me in the comments if you think it's middle grade or YA, because I'm not really sure. But I had heard it almost compared to like Harry Potter and just being this epic fantasy that was just completely amazing, and I thought it was decent. I thought it was okay. I thought it was a good solid read, but not amazing. And I find myself excited to read the second one because now I don't have those expectations as high, and I feel like I'll enjoy it more. So the premise of this story is we follow Sunny, who lives in Nigeria, and she is an albino who feels as if she doesn't fit in anywhere. And then she finds out she has magical abilities. And then she goes to this almost magic school to learn how to control and to use her magical abilities. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's a pretty basic plot. And I felt as if it's definitely one that's been used before. The albino aspect of it was an interesting twist. But I think that there was something about it that was original and yet not at the same time. So those are my thoughts. Judge me as you will, but I enjoyed it. Like, it's in my higher ranked books of the month. I just didn't love it. I just didn't love it. Then we have Silver Girl by Leslie Petrusky. Pietrzysk. Leslie Pietrzysk. And this is... This was sent to me by Unnamed Press. And I enjoyed it. Didn't love it. Felt held at a distance by it. We follow a character without a name. And she becomes best friends with this girl within the first chapter. And we then follow the two of them in their friendship. And their experience in life, while at the same time there is a serial killer afoot who is killing people. This was bell jar-esque. It wasn't the bell jar, to be sure, but it was bell jar-esque in terms of the anxiety and the depression. It was well written. It was dark, and it talks a lot about trauma and how that affects the person's life, which you guys know I love that subject. I found this book easy to read, easy to process, well-rounded, and highly enjoyable. I definitely would recommend it to a certain reader, but I feel like some people would be held at a distance by the fact that the narrator never has a name. I know that that's something that a lot of authors have done in the past. It's not groundbreaking, but it is something that happens. But it can sometimes really hold you at a distance, and it can really give you this feeling of outsiderness to it. Where you're never really given enough information about this person to fully immerse yourself in their care. And it was just really interesting. And it was interesting to follow. And I definitely recommend it. But be aware, it's hard to get into as an emotional thing. As a read, it's easy. Like, you can definitely dive into it. It's quick, it's easy, it's really compact, and it's well done. But as an emotional story, it's hard to dive into. And it's really draining. Really, really draining. We Take Me Apart by Molly Gaudry. I read this while I brought 3 short novels with me when I went to Massachusetts for Christmas. And then I just read one of the short novels every single night while everyone else was asleep. So this one, again, I went into it with high expectations. I think my expectations were a little bit more rewarded in this situation. This is a poetry short novella style book. It follows a woman's experience and relationship with her mother and the ones she loves. And it talks about mental health. And it talks about her journey. And I really liked it. It was fairy tale-esque. It was beautiful. It was really wonderful. I highly recommend it. I definitely think that if you like poetry, this is beautiful. And it's one that I'll read again and again, and I'll probably mark up a few times the next times I read it, just because I think there were some moments that I really loved. I didn't have a pen with me at the time that I read it the first time, so I didn't get to mark it up, but I definitely think this is one that I'll mark up in the future. Sylvia Plath. This is the collected poems of Sylvia Plath. I loved it. I really loved it. I love Sylvia Plath. I really enjoy her writing style, and I think that it's really beautiful. And it's dark. And it's twisted. And it's depressing, but it's really beautiful. And I really recommend it, and I really enjoy it. And I think if you like the bell jar, this is a great place to go next. Or if you haven't started any Sylvia Plath before, this is a great place to begin. I highly recommend it. I think it's fantastic, and I really enjoyed it. Little Women. I buddy read this with Amanda Center and another subscriber of Amanda's. And I'm going to link Amanda's channel down below. I liked this. I did. I thought it was really sweet, really easy to digest, really fun, really different. I can see why it's a classic. I can definitely understand the aspects of it. I do not ship Joe and Lori. I do not ship them at all. I think that that's a messed up situation, and I think Lori is a bit of a shit. I overall just really enjoyed this, and I thought it was really beautiful, and I thought it was really well written, and it was easy to digest, and it was easy to just whip through, and I thought it was a great Christmas read, and I just really think that if you're going to read it, Christmas time is really the best time to read it, because there are several Christmases in this. But yeah, I just enjoyed it. It was just a good enjoy. Does that make sense? Like, it wasn't anything spectacular or amazing or blow your mind off. Like, it was just enjoyable. And it was just sweet. And it was just easy. And it was just nice. So I definitely recommend this book. And I think it's a good read. Paperweight by Meg Haston. Oh boy. This one, oh boy, like, I read this over the period of one day during several different doctor's appointments where I was just sitting in the waiting room for long periods of time. And I cried, and I felt a lot of feelings and a lot of relatability and a lot of fear and a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety, and I thought it was brilliant. And I thought it was really well done, and I thought it was really well executed. It's the story of a young girl named Stevie, who is 17 years old, and she is sent to a facility for people with anorexia to get treated, or an eating disorder facility to get treated. It was mainly focused on people with bulimia and anorexia. Binge eating was really not addressed. But it was still really relatable, really understandable, really devastating, really beautiful, really well done, and I thought it was really well executed. I think that for me, this story was really easy to follow, sad, hard to swallow, but really beautiful. And I really recommend that you read this, especially if you're interested in talking about mental health as far as the eating disorders go. I think this is a great place to go. I felt it was good representation. I felt it was pretty accurate, and it felt really like you were trapped in this mindset with Stevie, as far as her eating habits went. It was just this overwhelming feeling of trappedness that I felt so strongly connected to, because I have similar thought spirals when it comes to eating. And they're not exactly identical, but they're very easily relatable and very easily spotted. And I definitely think that this is a relatable, wonderful book to read for somebody. If you are in the midst of getting treatment for an eating disorder, or in the midst of finding out you have an eating disorder, this may not be the book for you because it's very triggering. But if you have come to terms with your eating disorder and you're kind of like processing it, or you have conquered your eating disorder and you feel strong enough to read about it, or if you're just curious about eating disorders and you want to know more, this book is great. I definitely recommend it. Then we have Vaughn Fire. There we go. That was bothering me. It's bent. That's really depressing. This one is by Kristen Ritter, who was Jessica Jones. I was not expecting to enjoy this as much as I did. I don't often love thrillers, but I had 2 thrillers this month that I really enjoyed. It follows a character named Abby, who grew up in a small town, and she has to go home to the small town in order to do some research on the water and contamination within the water from the biggest company within the small town. And she is going back there because of something that happened when she was young during her high school years that always shook her and always made her believe that there was something sinister going on within this town. And it talks about bullying, it talks about trauma, it talks about the experience of a teenager and what that looks like, and how bullying can affect their reliability, and not their reliability as a person, but their reliability in narration and understanding of their own situation, and seeing how the environment around them is affected by their bullying and affected by the people who are bullying them. And it was just really interesting, and I really enjoyed it. I think that if you like those kinds of subjects about trauma and the experience of bullying and darker secrets within small towns, you'll really like this book. I definitely recommend it. Then we have When She Woke by Hilary Jordan, and I adored this. This follows Hannah. She is a young woman, about 25 or 26, and she falls in love with a man that is a very beloved man within her community and who is married. And they have an affair. And when she falls pregnant, she has an abortion. But in this culture, abortion is outlawed, and you are found guilty of murder. And this system of this dystopian world is that you are monochromed, which is a treatment of dye and a virus put into your body that dyes your skin a certain color, and it demonstrates your crime. And so her skin is dyed red for murderer. And she is set up in this situation where she is now being called a murderer for having had an abortion. And she is trying to survive, because what happens is you're dyed your color and you're sentenced to a certain amount of years in this color, and then you're sent back out into society. You have 6 months in broadcasted, what's the word I'm looking for, solidarity. So you're put into a cell and you're left alone for 6 months, but it's broadcasted to everybody so everyone can see you on TV and see what you're doing while you're in this confined area. And so Hannah has been released from this confined area, is sent to a church that takes in those who have done smaller crimes, or that have done crimes but are not as violent as the others maybe. And so she goes into this new world and she's terrified and everything's wrong and her family is her mother's disowned her. Her father loves her but he can't help her because her mother won't let him. Her sister won't speak to her because she's in an abusive relationship with a man that she's married to, and they're having a baby, and she's trying to keep herself and the baby safe. And the man who had sex with Hannah and who got her pregnant is a higher up man within the church, and he pulls some strings to get her into this church facility to get her treatment, or to keep her safe for the first 6 months of her sentence. So the story goes from there. I adored it. I thought it was great. The second half of it was a little less great, and that was the only downfall I had to it, but other than that, I loved it. It was epic. I wonderfully and highly recommend this. I think it's fantastic. Last but not least, we have Girl on the Landing. This was my favorite book of the month. This is by Paul Torday. I adored this, loved it, marked it all up. It's all written in and scribbled all over. And this is the story of Michael, who is, I don't want to give anything away. So he is married to a woman named Elizabeth, and at the beginning of the movie at the beginning of the book, they go to a dinner party, and then all of a sudden his behavior starts to change drastically. And something has snapped within him, and nobody knows what it is, or what's happening, or why he's changed. And so everybody's just really confused and trying to figure this out, and it's just a really interesting story of character development and psychology, and whether or not somebody should be kept on meds for psychological reasons or not, whether that is a good thing to do. I'm not going to tell you what the psychology of the background is. I'm going to be doing a spoiler review of this with a few other books together to talk about a subject matter that I am really frustrated by, but I still enjoy the books. So, yes. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it. It's by Paul Torday. I definitely think it's great. Highly recommend. 5 out of 5 stars. I think it's fantastic. Oh my goodness, guys, that was another long one. So thank you for bearing with me. This has been a long week of long videos. I apologize. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you loved it, click that subscribe button. And if you have any questions, comments, or quandaries, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.